This is our tier list of wedding dresses or wedding dress elements that I hate altering. The more we hate it, the more expensive it's going to be, because usually that means it's like really time intensive or labor intensive, and so it's therefore going to be a little bit more expensive to the customer. So this is actually really good information for you to have. We're gonna start off nice and easy. If you have just like a simple dress and you only need it taken in like the top third of your bodice, like I would do that all day, every day. Hands down, so easy. You're not going into a waist seam, you're not going into anything else. It's just like, especially if there's no sleeve connected, it's so easy to just open up the armhole, sew it up, close it back up. So easy. Love that. Illusion side cutouts. Honestly, you're gonna pay for it and it's gonna suck to do, especially if you're like, I can't lose any of the cutout and you need the dress taken down like 2 sizes. Like if you need it taken in any significant amount, the amount of math that goes into doing that, because you're not just taking it in on the side seam, you have a slice cutout and you're taking in some here and some here. And then sometimes if you're like particularly busty, you need to take in more on the back side than you do the front side. And it's like a mathematical nightmare, and the dresses are harder to get into. And so it's like bottom. Okay, we get these a lot, and they're high volume hems, whether they're just high volume. If they're just high volume but they're like a simple rolled hem, they're like pretty easy, like number 2 on the list probably. But as you add design elements to it, like if there's horsehair that you have to unpick and replace, if there's beading that you have to undo and rebead, if there is lace that you have to unpick and then replace, it just like goes lower and lower on the list the more elements you have. And sometimes you have a dress that has a beaded layer, a lace layer, 2 horsehair layers, and they're all really high volume, and that's going to be so expensive because you're spending so much time unpicking by hand and then sewing and then like adding elements back in. So that's, I think that could hit a couple different levels depending on the dress. And then just beaded dresses in general, like if it's a really heavily beaded dress and you have to take in the sides and do the bust and do the shoulder, that's like 3 different seams that you have to uncover the beading from, sew down the seams, and then you have to re-bead by hand. And sometimes those dresses are machine beaded originally, and then you're going in and doing hand beading to mimic machine beading, and so you're taking like 5 times longer than a machine would to bead it. So that adds a lot of time and your hand starts to cramp. And I literally, they're not the worst, but you're gonna pay for it. It's probably like mid to maybe 4th. Lace dresses. There's 2 different ways that you can have a lace dress. The lace can either be sucked into the side seam, and if so, top tier. That's awesome. Like that's so easy to work with. It's just like, it's basically just like having a plain crepe dress. You have the detail elements, but I don't have to deal with the detail elements on like a structural level. And so I can just take the sides in like normal. But if it's a higher end gown, if it's a little bit more expensive, the lace is gonna be like sewn over, like the side seams right here, the lace is going to be sewn over it. And in order to get to that seam and do the work that you have to come through and unpick this lace and then sew whatever you need to on the seam, fix it up, and then you have to go through and hand sew this lace back down. So it's a lot more labor intensive. Having to sew the lace back down is probably like 2 or 3. Like it's fine, but it's more time consuming. It's just like kind of an annoyance. But if you just like put on a good TV show, you can just do a little bit of hand sewing while you're doing it. It doesn't take that much brain work. It's just an annoyance. The best is when you get just like a full coverage, like fairly modest gown in a material that's pretty easy to work with, like a stretch crepe I love, and you just like need to do a shoulder lift on it. You just like pop the sleeve off, take up the shoulder, and put the sleeve back on. I can do that in like 45 minutes. It's so easy. It's really nice. Just like a simple crepe dress that is just one side seam down the whole thing. There's no splits in it. There's no nothing. You can just take in the sides down one seam line, and I could be taking it in a whole size. I don't even care. It's just like so easy. It's just like butter. It's so seamless and easy. And so that would be like probably top tier. It's just like quick, kind of brainless, but like you very quickly get into lower tiers if it's that same silhouette, but it's like mesh, it's tulle, and it's a tulle sleeve, and there's lace overlaying, because then you have to unpick the lace that's connecting the sleeve to the bodice of it, and you have to do it so carefully, otherwise you'll leave holes in the tulle, and then you have to remove the sleeve, and then it's just, everything's so much daintier, everything's so much more fragile, everything takes so much longer. And so it's like the exact same alteration, but it will take 4 or 5 times as long. And so that's like mid-tier. Like it's fine, we can do it, we will do it, but you'll pay a lot more for it because it's so much more labor intensive. Doing a waist hem, sometimes people are like, why'd you hem it from the bottom? Why didn't you do a waist hem? Because if you take it up at the waist, it's not like it's so much easier. Like if it's a pleated waist, sometimes it's easier. But if you're taking up like layers of tulle skirt in a waist hem, you have to go into the side and take in every layer of the skirt at the side seam. Like the waist is this big, but then if you drop it the front, it makes the waist circumference bigger, and then when you pull it up, you have to make it smaller again, and so you have to like take that in somewhere, so you're taking in so many side seams. It's just annoying unless there's like 3 hem elements on layers that you have to deal with, and it would be so much more time effective and it's still gonna look as good to do the waist hem. I will not do a waist hem. They're so annoying. And then after you've done the waist hem, you have to do all these proportion changes to the high hip and the low hip. Like it's necessary sometimes, but sometimes it just doesn't feel worth it because it feels like so much more work. Custom sleeves are very mid-tier for me. We do a good job of carrying samples of our custom sleeves, and we have those given to our feeder stores, our bridal shops that send us a lot of alterations. However, we do now charge custom sleeves hourly because almost every single bride that comes into us wanting this specific custom sleeve, we make it for them, and then they're like, actually I changed my mind, and they want something completely different. And so we've now just started charging for it hourly, because even they can be shown the exact sleeve and exactly what it's going to look like, and then they just like change their mind once they're in the alteration process, which is completely fine, but we need to be paid for the time that we're investing into their dress. And so that's how we do it now. So it's one of those where it's like, yeah, we'll do it, but like you're gonna pay for it. And so the more knowledge you have as to what you want, the cheaper the process is going to be, and the more painless the process is going to be, honestly. If you've purchased fabrics from a designer, then we're not wasting fabrics creating multiple sleeves for you. And a lot of times we'll do a mock-up in a different fabric if we have something that has a similar texture or drape or weight, but sometimes we don't have that, and so we just have to go with the designer fabric, and so we don't want to waste that fabric because it can be really expensive. Another one that I just thought of that I absolutely hate, if you're taking down a dress like 2 sizes and down underneath the bum at the side seam, it splits into like a godet at the side. It's so annoying to alter, and it doesn't always lay right the first time. You can always get it to lay right, but not always the first time. And so it's just like unpicking, going over it again, unpicking, going over it again. And sometimes it's like 5 layers of fabric are sewn together, and then all of a sudden there's 5 layers down here that you have to go in and taper in and then reconnect it, and it's just a pain. So that's probably like mid to lower tiers for me, because it's fine, it's doable, it's just tedious and annoying. Oh, another one that's good to talk about is exterior boning channels. This was really popular last season. It's not as big this season, but everyone wanted like the boning look on their dresses, and it's tough when the boning is on the outside, because if you want to access the seam that it's covering up, because it's nearly almost covering a seam, at least the ones that you need to access, then you have to go through and unpick the whole thing, access the seam line you need to, and then sew it back down. And the tough thing about that is that the manufacturer, when they're sewing those down, they don't usually have the whole dress constructed at that point, and so they can sew it down and it looks really neat and really beautiful and easy. Once the dress is fully constructed, there's a skirt attached, there's a lining attached, it gets a lot harder to make it look clean. So when we go and put those exterior boning channels on in alterations, we have a lot more elements to deal with, of there being a bodice lining attached that we can't sew through, or there's a skirt attached, so it's just a lot bulkier to put under the machine, and so it doesn't always look as polished as a manufacturer has it. And then sometimes they have these exterior boning channels on an illusion bodice, and when they have it on an illusion bodice, it's usually covering the seam allowance, which usually means that there's no seam allowance to be worked with. And sometimes brides will come in and they'll say, I need this let out a little bit, but when I say that there's nothing to let out on them, I literally mean that there is like an 1/8 inch of fabric, and there's nothing you can do about that. You need that as seam allowance so that the seam stays together. So it's just like, it makes it impossible to let anything out. You can still take in, but you would still have to unpick and replace, which is annoying. Honestly, I think the thing that I hate the very most is these vintage redos. Like if you're bringing in your mom's dress or your grandma's dress or whoever's dress it is, and you just want it chopped to be a mini, easy. Like that's totally doable. Sometimes there's some lace trim that we have to move up, but it's doable. What's frustrating is when someone sends us in a photo of the dress and they say, I love my mom's dress. I love my mom's dress so much, but I want to make the A-line a fitted dress, and I want to change the neckline from a high neck to a low sweetheart, and I actually want to make it strapless as well, and then I want to add some exterior boning lines. Like basically all they're saying is like, I want some detail elements from my mom's dress, but I want it to look nothing like it. And that is so difficult to do because these vintage dresses are not constructed the same. And so it's not really in our wheelhouse. It's not in our normal like day-to-day functions of how we do things. They don't always have linings. They rarely have structure because most vintage dresses were full coverage, full modesty, if you will. And if something comes up onto your shoulder, it reduces any need for interior structure or boning or anything that you would need in order to take it from a full coverage gown to something that's strapless or even strappy. It's not really gonna fit the same. They weren't intended to be something that really snatches you or really like shows off your curves. They were fairly plain garments in terms of construction. Obviously there's lots of ornate elements on them, but these girls want to bring in the dress, essentially use bits and pieces of the fabric to create something completely new with these very old, sometimes unstable fabrics, and it's very frustrating. And I do find that those brides who do want to bring in these vintage dresses for massive restorations or massive reimaginations, they don't always know exactly what they want and don't always have appropriate expectations of what is possible with the dress. And so you run into a lot of issues there, and for that reason that is like bottom of the totem pole for me. Like, we hardly take on vintage dresses anymore because of those difficult elements, and when we do take them on, we charge them hourly because more often than not, when we get a vintage dress in, what comes with it is a bride who has not made up her mind on certain design elements. And just to speak to this really quick, because I was gonna say, if you buy a more expensive dress, understand that your alterations will probably be more expensive, which I stand behind mostly, because if you're buying a $6,000 to $10,000 dress, there's probably some detail elements in there that took a long time to construct that will therefore take a long time to alter. However, that's not always the case. Sometimes you can bring it in for a fairly inexpensive fix if it's something that isn't very time consuming and doesn't deal with any detail elements. However, even if it's a simpler fix, it doesn't always mean it's going to be less expensive, because other things you need to consider, it may look simple from the outside, but once you get into the dress, you may have to deconstruct a portion of the dress in order to get into the interior of the dress between the outside fabric and the lining fabric to even access this simple fix. And so it may not be as inexpensive as you think it will looking at the outside of the dress. And let's add Amazon dresses to the bottom of the list, because I don't love altering those. They're just not constructed well. It's similar to vintage dresses where it's like you don't know what you're gonna get once you go in and open up that dress. And so it's like, I can't actually appropriately estimate how much I'm gonna charge you for alterations until I've seen the inside of the dress, because looking from the outside, I can't tell. Okay, let us know what tier you want next. We're kind of thinking about doing specific tiers of alterability within certain designers. Like, I'd love to review Maggie Sottero and their dresses and their alterability within Maggie Sottero or Sync or whatever it may be. What do we need to know? I'm happy to help. Put in the comments below what video you want to see next, whether that's information about alterations, if you want to see a certain process, whatever it is, drop it in the comments and we'll be sure to get to it.